Hi, Sita.
Admit all.
Brilliant.
You are there, right?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can. Yeah.
We can't
I'll
see
just
you, but we
admit
can hear you.
everyone. We can hear you. We want to see you as well, Sita.
My camera is on.
Camera is on.
My camera is on.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see myself in the screen.
Okay, but we can't.
Oh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was perfect. We were talking, weren't we? Suddenly everything's...
Yeah, it was all right, but suddenly it went off.
I don't know why this has happened, because everything on my end is on. Camera is on, microphone's on.
Sita, can you see the share option as well in your screen, where you can share slides if you have? Are you sharing something today?
No, I'm just going
okay,
to
fine.
storytell. So
Fine.
I can't see a share option though.
Yeah,
Oh, yes,
because now you have joined as a guest. Yeah.
At the top it says share content. Yes, I could.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. Okay, the camera option, do you want to just click off and back on?
Yeah. Off.
Okay. Just a minute. Let me also just check the
On.
settings.
It's on now. Then it was off.
It's on now.
But now it's on now. Yeah.
Allow camera.
Do you want to
Okay,
admit?
shall I just admit
all?
everyone? Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I put my camera on now or when you open?
Yeah, I have started the meeting. Now I am admitting everyone, so you can switch on your cameras if you want to. Yeah.
Admit all?
Yep, I have. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting, today's event, the storytelling session by Sita Brahmachari. Hi, I am Arnisha. So far, you have been receiving all the emails from me, so you might know my name. I am the digital library manager, and I'm based out of India. I have with me today Niti Saxena, the Senior Manager Libraries. I also have Anjana with me, who will be supporting me in the event. And sorry for the delays, everyone, because there was a technical glitch. We were fixing it up. I know we have delayed by 10 minutes, but without further delay, I would like to introduce the country director of Myanmar, Sarah Deverall, who will take us through the introduction. And over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Anisha, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's on the line with us. And I understand that participants for today's reading marathon come from a range of countries, from India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Myanmar, Spain, Nigeria, Algeria, and Egypt at least. Nepal has just appeared in the screen. So that's fantastic. We've got quite a global community with us, which is really, really lovely. Now, this, of course, is one of the events in relation to our British Council Digital Library. And just so you all know, the Digital Library is available now in over 30 countries with around 150,000 registered members. So our library hosts content of interest to a very wide spectrum of audiences, ranging from an avid to an occasional reader. I won't ask you which you all are. You can share that later, perhaps. But the Digital Library provides access to resources which help support professional and academic growth while making entertainment available at your fingertips as well. So through the Digital Library, we aim to curate and showcase the very best of UK resources. And in addition to this infotainment content, the library also organises online programming ranging from author talks, book reads, storytelling sessions, and so on, to keep the digital library community engaged throughout their annual membership tenure. So this reading marathon is one such engagement activity, and we've already completed 2 of them recently. The response has been overwhelming, with, I understand, around 600 participants from across the globe and over 3,000 participants registered. So today is really exciting because we have Sita Brahmachari joining us to facilitate today's reading marathon session. So just a little bit about Sita, who's online with us now. The author Sita Brahmachari is an international award-winning author, known for her impactful children and adults novels and her work in theatre. She was born in Derby in the UK in 1966 to Indian and English parents, and her storytelling draws inspiration from her upbringing in the Lake District in the UK and visits to Kolkata in India to meet her family there. With an MA in arts education and extensive experience in community theatre, she's championed diverse voices through collaborations with major theatre companies like Tamasha and the Royal Shakespeare Company. Since her debut novel Artichoke Hearts in 2011, she's written numerous Carnegie-nominated works. She served as a human rights ambassador for Amnesty International and is currently working on a cross-European project exploring children's rights. So Sita teaches creative writing and also supports refugee communities through her writing, which is a really important activity. Just to say that her intergenerational writing is celebrated for offering hope and agency and reflecting diverse stories and realities of global roots and branches. In her creative writing workshops, she with both children and adults, she runs various participative forms. And she, in this workshop today, she's going to be inviting participants to explore some of her treasured inspirations and prompts for intercultural and intergenerational storytelling. She will share some magical pieces from her patchwork storytelling quilt that participants will find embedded in her novels, pieces related to landscape, culture, memory, history, childhood, home, and belonging. So during the session, I understand Sita will encourage participants to reflect on those inspirations in their own writing and to begin word weaving their own patchwork quilt of storytelling. So I'm really delighted now to welcome Sita to our virtual stage here with us, and please enjoy the next hour with Sita. Thank you. Think over to you now, Sita.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I'm seeing from your smile that you can hear me because we've had a few technical problems.
Yes.
But you can hear me, I hope.
We can hear you, Sita. We can't actually see you, well, I can't, but I'm not sure why.
Oh,
But we
dear.
can certainly hear you. So that's a good
Well,
start.
we can do oral storytelling. That's good until you can see my face. You can imagine what I might look like. But I just wanted to say what an amazing opportunity it is at this time in the world history to enter a global community of creative people who are wanting to tell intergenerational stories. Because for me, from childhood, intergenerational connections were my inspiration. I'm going to start by reading you a little Once Upon a Time, which was the first piece in my patchwork storytelling journey. Once upon a time, how else can I start this session? Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Sita who held many stories inside of her, but somehow couldn't find a way to tell them. The world seemed too busy and noisy. But when she was very young, she found a listening tree. It was a beautiful willow beside the River Eden where she lived with her family, surrounded by awesome mountains. On weekdays and holidays in every season, Sita would seek out her tree, and there she would cradle nature's store, serenaded by river music in all its moods and glories. Back then, little Sita would never have believed that one day all of these tales would become stories that would be read by a global audience. When Sita left home, she was sad to leave her listening tree, but soon discovered that she carried it within her. All she had to do was close her eyes and imagine herself back there. Years later, when Sita had become a mother of 3 children, she met an artist called Grace, who sewed Sita a quilt containing inspirations from all her tales. And so it was that Sita finally became an author, flying around the world on Grace's patchwork storytelling quilt, spreading the word that word weaving is for everyone, and it is a lifelong joy and a treasure hunt of the imagination. So that is my first patchwork storytelling quilt piece. I don't know if you can see me yet, but it doesn't really matter. We can share the voice of storytelling. So as a child, I would be holding these pictures up for you to see, but you'll just have to use your imaginations if you still can't see me. As a child growing up in the Lake District, I did enjoy reading, but I've got a little book here, which is Beatrix Potter, The Tale of Pigling Bland. And I didn't find in the stories that I found was given when I was growing up, I didn't find the kind of family that I am from, where, you know, my father came to this country in 1959 to be a doctor in the National Health Service. He met my mum, an English nurse from the Lake District. So I felt I had this wide diaspora storytelling power within me. And yet at school and in the stories that I was given, I didn't find that global window to see myself in, or to place those stories that I was writing in that little tree in. And so I began to write myself. I wrote little poems. My uncle, Nirmal Brahmachari, who was a poet, came from India, and he gave me my first book of poems called For Your Delight. And he told me that you could capture little pieces of your thoughts and ideas in the world in poetry, in this kind of incredibly beautiful distilled space. Now, I would be holding up, if you could see me, my notebook, which I started getting for like birthdays and Christmases. I have hundreds of notebooks. I have more notebooks than I have stories published, because I started doodling and daydreaming my ideas from that little tree trunk that I used to sit by the river, and I started dreaming stories, what if stories. And a lot of the stories were kind of based on the stories that my dad used to tell me about growing up in Kolkata and his family there. And in the Lake District, you know, surrounded by mountains and lakes, and, you know, my heritage, my mum's farming family from the Lake District, that felt very far away. But in the space between us going to Calcutta and my dad's storytelling, I think my writer self was created. Now, I have been talking for a little while, and I am hoping that some of you are already doodling ideas, words that I've said, things that maybe prompt something in yourself. Maybe I've prompted an idea of what it was like for you as a child in finding stories, whether you yourselves felt that the stories that you were given were for you, and whether you found a place in them, or whether you were a child writer like me. So maybe, you know, the kind of things that I'm talking about now are connecting to something in you. I encourage you now to doodle those connections down for later after this session, to pull the ideas that I have kind of passed on to you from this storytelling patchwork journey together, and make a little patchwork piece that you can hold on to, that may turn into yourself writing a novel. So it's very difficult for me at the moment, I have to say, because I can't see anyone, and I know that you can't see me, but I am carrying on the storytelling, and maybe Anisha can come in if there are any questions, and ask questions as we go, because at least I'll feel then like I'm not talking into the void. I can see Sarah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just put my picture back on. I just wondered if you wanted to just have one more check, Sita, top right-hand corner of your screen, to check that the camera icon doesn't have is it
It's
if you
on.
click on it again?
Yeah. I'll try again, but it is on. So for me, I
Right.
put it on. Now it's off, and
Okay.
and
now
then
it's on.
now it's on.
Yeah. Okay. It's a mystery, because we can see a little icon there that suggests it's not quite on, but Okay, we'll continue because it's lovely listening to your voice anyway.
What a shame, because it just makes everything much more difficult, doesn't it? Anyway, I think we had a problem last time, something like this. But from my screen, it says my camera's on, and I can see myself, which is really annoying because I don't want to see myself. I want to see you all.
Yeah,
I can
Sita,
see.
you can, if you want to, just wanted to come in, you can see the participants from the view option just beside React. If you see the view options at the top.
Yes, brilliant. And I can put on your gallery.
Go to
large
large
gallery.
gallery. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Now I can see. Now I'm not speaking into the void. It's really lovely to see your faces. I'm really sorry
Yeah.
that
Okay.
you can't see me. But anyway, so that's much better for me. At least I can see you. Wonderful. Thank you. So
Thanks.
I hope you've got a journal or a piece of paper by your side. And as I'm sharing these storytelling pieces, I really am going to have to use my best skills as a writer, because I'm going to have to describe the pieces to you. Okay, so I've told you a little bit about my early childhood. There was a moment in my childhood as a reader that changed my life forever as a reader and a writer. And that was when I was given Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And I want you all to think about, as I'm talking, a book that was kind of a really seminal book when you were growing up, a book that kind of changed the way that you looked at the world as a child or young person. Maybe people can put those in the chat, because it'd be really nice to share, you know, what those are. But so I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and before that I had felt, talking to my father often about the way that when he arrived in Britain, didn't always feel like that he had the welcome that he had expected to come as a doctor to England. And although he was an amazing doctor and made many connections in communities, he didn't always feel that he had access to the places that he wanted to work. And as a child, I felt this very deeply. And I couldn't understand the injustice that my father obviously felt but didn't speak about very often. I remember a particular journey, this is a patchwork piece of mine, going from Hull, where we lived, to the Lake District, where my mother's home was. And my dad really wanted a GP's practice there. And we had a green Beetle, a car, which I loved. And we were traveling up to the Lake District and had a small screen, and the windscreen wipers were going really fast. We were going over the fells in the Lake District, and the weather was terrible. And I remember on the radio came the song We Shall Overcome by Joan Baez. And I looked to my dad, and it was terrible weather, and he was, seeking this practice in the Lake District so we could all be together as a family. And the tears were rolling down his cheeks. And he said nothing. But in that moment, I connected something to do with reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings to my dad's experience. And I was a small child. So one of the things that I think is a treasure hunt of the imagination as a writer is when you do not reject the child in you, but you realize that the child's imagination can be carried through a whole lifetime. And so as a child, I didn't always have the answers to these questions that I was asking, so that as in Corey's Rock, one of my novels, when myself and my dad stood on a rock in the Lake District, in Orkney, where we went, when you grow up somewhere with mountains, then you have to go somewhere even more wild. So we went to Orkney, those islands, and I remember standing on a rock, and this is depicted in one of my stories, Corey's Rock, which is illustrated by Jane Ray. You'll need to look. Sorry, I can't hold these up to you and show you, but so there's a picture in that story where there's a child, and she has her hand in a comforting way on her father's back, and the father is looking out to sea. And this came from a real moment in my patchwork storytelling journey, which again is connected to I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and the child Sita was connecting all of these things, where my dad said, do you know, whenever I'm near the sea, I remember my long journey to Britain by ship. And he said, I remember, in a day before Google and Skype and these kind of interactions, everything I had was in my suitcase. And I turned to my dad and I said, well, can I see the things that you brought with you in your suitcase? And he said, oh, yes, if you would like to see them, that would be really, I would love to show you. So when we got back home, he went into the loft and he brought out these objects. And one of them was a shell. And some of you who came to the first session might have seen my shell. And I said, Dad, you must have carried this shell with you. It must have been very heavy. Why did you bring this shell with you? And he said, because it connected me with the natural world in India, in Calcutta, from my childhood to where I was going to. And then he said something that stayed with me throughout my whole storytelling journey. He said, when you are born in one place and when you travel to another place, a part of you is always suspended between worlds. Now, please, I'm hoping that you're doodling. I can see that some of you are kind of concentrating hard and looking at me, but I'm hoping that you're kind of doodling even kind of an emotional thread. Sometimes I doodle shapes. My notebooks are full of kind of strange shapes and swirls and sometimes vortexes and patterns and things like that, or even a little picture of a girl standing on a rock with her father by the sea. But for me, when I emotionally engage with a storyteller and a story, the things that I take with me at the end of the story are again connecting to what Maya Angelou says. She says, I'm paraphrasing, but she says, you'll forget what people said to you, but you will never forget that the way that they made you feel. And that's at the end of a wonderful book that you've read. You might forget the characters, you might even remember the plot lines, but you will never forget what the intergenerational thread that was passed from the writer to you as the reader. And so as a child, I think that was a space that I sat in, suspended between worlds, with partly understanding. And I think my storytelling, really, right to this day, has been about trying to stitch together the unsaid and the silent places in history. And I think as a child, a lot of children, a lot of people will say, well, children don't see color. Well, children don't, they don't ask for these things, or, but the thing is, I think for myself as a child who was quite a silent child and who just told their stories in the tree trunk thinking they were private things and not for school, it took me a long time to see that I could be an author. And I was 40 before I published my first novel. I can see some people, and I can see a child doodling here in the screen, which is really special for me. We think of doodling. I do doodling and art. I did yesterday. I wish I could show you, with people, adults at the refugee centre in Islington where I work. And, people who perhaps, some people who have been, when they were children, child soldiers, or some people who've never had the opportunity to paint or draw just for pleasure. And I think that part of reading is and part of writing, and it's so wonderful to see that child doodling on the screen, is about freeing our imaginations so that we can go beyond polemics, we can go beyond entrenched places, and we can start to find the nuance of stepping into other people's shoes and feel what it might be like to be them, and see what it's might be like to them. And so that the point that you might get to in a book, which I always hope that I can provide as a writer, is that moment where maybe someone says to you, enough is enough, you've been reading too late into the night, it's work tomorrow, you've got to get up or go to school, and you say, no, there is no way that I can stop reading this story at this moment. I think for me, storytelling and the patchwork of storytelling is about being in a place in which all of the emotions and all of the senses are heightened to a place where we don't normally go to in everyday life. And so I have often written about the rites of passage moments in life, the death of a grandparent in Artichoke Heart, seen through the eyes of a 12-year-old girl, or in Jasmine Skies, my second novel, Meera, the same character as in Artichoke Hearts, traveling to India, to Calcutta, to see her father's family house after he has passed away, her grandfather's family house. So they're quite often full of a tide of emotions, my storytelling. And I'm very sorry, but I will probably have to send you these photographs so I can put them on the website. But I've got here my own child notebook where my dad told me about the terrible speech of The Rivers of Blood by Enoch Powell. And I had already sort of understood something about racism for myself and also for my father and also for my mother, the experience of marrying my father as a white woman in Britain and the experience. Well, I had understood all of those things, and I started doodling a river. And the river that I will send a photograph to you about is called the River of Love. And the child took all of those moments of conflict and hostility and hate, and the child Sita transferred them to a river of love. And I think in all my storytelling, you will see that there is a kind of reaching across generations for, as Sarah said at the beginning of this session, for something hopeful, for something connective, for something which is beyond can't do, can't help, can't meet, can't love. Because this child obviously was looking between her parents and going, it is possible with difficulty, with constant arguments, with cultural differences, with misunderstandings, but it's possible. So I'm holding in my hand so that I will send you the picture of The Rivers of Love, which ends up becoming one of my most recent novels, When Secrets Set Sail, where the nursemaids of empire, the ayahs, the ghosts of the ayahs are in the house in Hackney, where the missionaries took them in after often they were abandoned on the streets of London. And the children, the contemporary children, are in that house, and they are seeing and hearing the ghosts of these nursemaids. And I'm holding up my conch shell here, the shell that my father bought from Calcutta. And I'm holding it to my ear because this is what the children do in the house. They need to hear what their history is. They need to understand about the colonial history that brought the ayahs to Britain. They need to hear why Deliz, who is Imtiaz's child that moves into the house, social worker from the Caribbean, how is it possible that this woman who has been a social worker for all of these years, this woman is threatened to be deported because she arrived on the Windrush? They need to start connecting these threads in the way that I do with my intergenerational stitching and storytelling. And so it is that as I'm holding up this shell, Imtiaz, who really needs, because she's had to leave her social worker behind, she really needs to find somebody to look after her. And she hears in the very far distance in this shell an ayah, nursemaid, speaking to her. And she says, "Piece me together, or my history is lost forever." So in that story, and I'm going to read you a tiny little bit of it now, in that story, the ayah has had to leave parts of her sari in different places that she has been, where a part of her history has been removed or taken from her. And in the story, the children go on a journey to the Victoria and Albert Museum, to houses that the ayah lived in, and they find a little piece of her hidden history, and they start to stitch the sari together so that it becomes one continuous piece of cloth. I'm not sure whether we have questions that can be asked to me at the moment because of our technology, but if we have, Sarah, or anybody there,
Yep.
that you can please let me know. But otherwise, I will read this moment from the story. Okay. So
No
this is
questions as of now, Sita. I'll let you know if there are questions, and yeah, I can come in.
Please do ask questions. This is a bit of a strange situation, but I'm trying my best. So I hope it's
Questions are
conveyed.
mainly about your camera so far, because people would love to see.
Anyway,
never mind.
I am so sorry that this is not working. Okay, but anyway, I will continue my storytelling. So I am holding up a shoe, and it is my father's very shiny black shoe. And I remember these shoes were always by the front door at home, and they were his best shoes that he used to walk out to do his doctoring in. I have one of these shoes and my sister has another because my dad passed away in 2008. But it was his storytelling that had turned me into a writer. His attempt to stitch together the heritage and the history from Calcutta to the Lake District. And I think you can see, and in the storytelling that I'm going to do right now, how this is sort of something that I think all authors do. And maybe if you're writing a book yourself or reading a book, you'll begin to see how the writer stitches the history together based on partly the things that have been important to them in their own lives. Okay, so Imtiaz turned towards the bed where Lucky lay peacefully meditating. Valini felt under the table and opened a drawer. Picking out a circle of embroidery, she unhooked a needle from the back and held it up to Imtiaz and Usha to reveal an almost complete embroidered pomegranate. Just a few seeds to add before I finished. Lakshmi taught my grandmother how to sew these, and the recipe for pomegranate cordial came from her too. It's her signature fruit, you'll see why. Valini pulled the ruby red thread and began to stitch. Each telling is as delicate as tying threads. It needs time and care, Valini smiled, straightening her back, and seemed to grow in stature as she prepared herself. She began quietly and slowly at first, staring at the candle as if speaking to the flickering flame. When I was a small child, an Indian woman named Lakshmi came to live with us. This is how the story has been passed down in the old tongue. One night, my mother was carrying me in her arms, rocking me to sleep. It is told that she was so tired herself that at first she thought she was dreaming when she looked down into the water to find an angel with white wings floating there. When she saw Lakshmi's face emerging, she screamed for my grandfather, who leant over the barge and hauled her out, wrapping her in blankets. He blew his warm breath into her, pressing on her chest for the water to leave and her life stream to return. That angel was Lakshmi, though she hardly knew who or what she was, for her mind had flown in pain and grief. But in her delirium, she spoke in a tongue not so strange to us. For 5 days, my mother and grandmother sat by her side and nursed her, placed hot bread poultices over her to draw the heat from her body. She was skin and bone, but in time she began to eat, and the water seemed to heal her as we travelled up and down the ways. She spoke little at first, but my mother told of how, whenever she sang her lullabies, all of us children would calm. Lakshmi grew happy on the slow tide of barge time and began to sew, embroider, and paint. She even shed her white sari and made her own bright skirts, blouses, and shawls. But when I was older, she taught me how to wear a sari, and I remember how happy she was when I finally got it right. Valini smoothed her fingers over the silk and gestured around the barge. Little by little, she began to talk of her ordeal, how the matron of Wilmington Manor tried to lock her away and forbade her to paint or pray. Valini sighed deeply, turning towards Lucky. Imtiaz noticed her shoulders relaxed to find her sleeping. Lowering her voice to a whisper, Valini tied off the last threads of her embroidery and placed it on the table. You know, a pomegranate's a symbol of love, and all of us loved Lakshmi. She had a special way with children, and we thought she might have a grown-up family of her own in India, but she confided in my mother that she'd never had children, and the husband she had been married off to at age 12. Age 12? Our age? Imtiaz gasped. Valini inclined her head. Lucky's husband had died before her 13th birthday, and she was taken in as a housemaid by Lata's family in a village on the outskirts of Calcutta, where she lived in a bungalow beside a pomegranate grove. In that newspaper clipping of your grandparents' marriage, it said that they both came from Calcutta too, remember? Imtiaz's fingers tapped the table. Usha nodded. I would love to find that place one day. Me too, Imtiaz said, and they smiled at each other. Maybe, just maybe, one day they would. So I wrote that novel not very long ago, a few years ago, actually, just about in lockdown. But I think you can see with the storytelling threads that I'm trying to weave to you that the ideas from those stories came from that child that was in the tree that first discovered that storytelling could include joy, and could include pain and could include truth. And that children, actually, the many thousands and thousands and thousands of children who are walking the world unaccompanied. And here we are, speaking with Myanmar and people from countries in which people have been displaced, and that children not only see what is happening, as in the project that I'm doing in Europe, and hear what is happening, but they are the story. They are walking this world unaccompanied. So one of the things that I think about is, how can I write stories which center and don't sort of deny the histories, but also give children that sort of charge that I had when I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Because for the first time, when I read that story, somehow the validity of my father's storytelling, my mother's storytelling, my own experiences in the world started to become real, and they started to become somewhere that I could belong, in a way that I didn't necessarily feel I could find those stories when I was in school. And even at university, when I studied English literature, I wasn't really finding those stories. I remember having a campaign at university to find writers, South Asian writers, African Caribbean heritage writers. I read Toni Morrison. I read African American writers, but didn't read so many South Asian writers at that time. But now Anita Desai, Arundhati Roy, these are all writers that have helped me to find a place of home as I read my stories. If we have any questions, please
Yes.
ask now. Lovely.
There are two questions, Sita.
Great.
So first question is from Nakfi. She's asking what's Sita's favorite book of her own.
Oh, of mine that I have
Yeah.
written. It's a really good question. I've often asked it. Oh, it's really hard. I say, I have 3 children, and I could not possibly say which of my children was my. They're very different, and they're written in a different moment of your life, and so they kind of carry different threads with you. But I suppose I can't say it's my favorite, but I suppose the story that kind of allows that child that was standing on the rock with my dad to kind of feel the threads are linked together is probably a novel called Tender Earth, which is my 3rd novel. And it is set in London. It's the 3rd in the kind of family story, They Can Be Read Alone, which began with Artichoke Hearts. It's the Levinson family. And they Mira Levinson in Artichoke Hearts is 12, but in Tender Earth she is 18, 19. So the first generation in Artichoke Hearts has now gone off to university, and it's the 12-year-old who's in school who's narrating the story, Lila, and she was the baby in Artichoke Hearts. And I was thinking about books that I read when I was young that I enjoyed, and I was thinking about Little Women. And I was thinking about, I'd like to write a contemporary Little Women, but which centered characters who are, who are in my life today. The diaspora, people that sit in a classroom in London, the ones that I met at the British Library last week, speaking 37 languages, the global diaspora that is the children that I write for. So I thought I want to center those children. So as I did in Artichoke Hearts, Mira Levinson falls in love with Jide Jackson, a refugee child from Rwanda. And it is a love story, but it's also a story in which Mira Levinson realizes what Jide Jackson's journey has been. And that story is going to be go back into theatre now. Of course, the resonance to Rwanda is a very different resonance to today. And many children in Britain from Artichoke Hearts learn what happened in Rwanda through Jide Jackson's story. Because Mira Levinson falls in love with him, she wants to know what his story is. And today, when I go into schools and talk to children and adults, they say, well, we can't understand what's happened in this country in terms of policy, that we could think to send children, families to Rwanda, which is a country that needs to heal. So in this story, the baby in Artichoke Hearts is meeting Parry, who is a refugee child from Iraq, as her best friend in school. And from Artichoke Hearts to Tender Earth, the world has changed a lot. And one of the things that comes into play in Tender Earth is poverty. So her best friend, Parry, she goes to her flat where she lives, and she sees that her mum has to turn off the lights at 5 o'clock in the evening because she can't afford to pay for the electricity. So into Tender Earth comes the cultural heritage of Mira and her family, but also, I have the shoe here, comes Janu, who is the character that I center in Jasmine Skies, the second novel. Janu worked in an orphanage in Calcutta, and he comes to Britain, and he has an idea that he is coming to a country which looks very, very different than the country that he comes to. So Janu comes to stay in the Levinson household, and he is really shocked by the level of homelessness, by the rise in racism, and all sorts of things that he did not expect Britain to be. And so in Tender Earth, the reason why I feel like if any story was most kind of connected all of the tissues of my life as a writer and also what I'm writing into children today, is that the history comes and also the legacies come into this story, but also the children at the center of it are doing better than the leaders of the world. They are finding a way to stand together and becoming friends and standing up to the different kinds of racisms that they experience. So for me, I suppose if any book encapsulated what I write about, it's Tender Earth. And the title, it's just been made into an audiobook, if you love audiobooks, actually, which is a long time after it was first published, which I'm very pleased about. Sometimes when you write into a space where people around you. I remember some years ago, before a Brexit vote in Britain, being with some friends, and I remember bursting into tears. And they said, "Well, why are you feeling so sad?" And I said, I can feel a change coming, and I feel like some of the change that is coming is going to take us backwards. And I remember my friend saying, "Oh, that sounds very kind of negative." This isn't a negative story because it's led by children, so they're wanting to kind of find a way to make things better. But I think when you write, sometimes you write ahead of the times. It's a writer's job to feel what's happening and to find a way to express it. So I'm very pleased that this book has just been made into an audiobook now, several years after it was written. So probably Tender Earth is the answer.
Thanks, Sita. And Tender Earth is available in the British Council digital library as the audiobook. So those of you who are members with us, you can definitely enjoy it. Next question, shall we take another one, Sita?
Oh, it's much nicer for me to answer questions with this strange situation we're in. Yes.
Okay, so there are two questions. So one is, Sana is asking, I just want to know how to make the storytelling session more interesting for grade 1 till 5. Do we need to make props or costumes for storytelling session?
Oh, I'm so sad that I can't show you my props. I'm going to send some photographs of my desk. Yes. I mean, those of you who are a bit older, maybe, I don't know in which systems that you grew up, but we used to have something called show and tell at school. It was a table, and often you were invited to bring something from home. It could be a conker or just a sari piece or a photograph or something like that. You were invited to bring something from home that meant something to you to school. And I remember that was the thing. It wasn't the books that I found. That was the thing that made me understand what storytelling was. Because as soon as you ask somebody, and I'm sure maybe you've all got something, I'm wearing the artichoke charm that the grandmother gives to the granddaughter in artichoke. We've all got these charms. We've all got these things that are important to us. As soon as you bring those in and you put those into the hands of a child, or you share, your storytelling shell, it's a different interaction. It isn't really about I'm an author or I'm a teacher and I know all of this. It's like we're storytellers. We're storytellers. And I think that that's what my dad's storytelling taught me, which was very much oral storytelling. It was just the joy of listening and sharing stories that we all remember. One of the things I ask when I go into schools is, does anyone have someone in their family where they go and sit at a table and they'll listen to their story, and they could listen to them all day, but maybe they find it difficult to concentrate in class, and the hands shoot up, and often the teachers say, oh, that child doesn't often say something, or that child doesn't often participate. And I'll say, well, who is that person? And they'll say, oh, well, that's my grandfather, and he tells stories. And I said, that's what reading is. That's what writing is. That's what storytelling is. And they say, but he doesn't even speak English in the way that I speak English. I said, exactly. I said, in that reaching for language, in that finding spaces of understanding, that's where storytelling comes from. And then those children go and they write amazing stories. Maybe their grammar isn't perfect, maybe whatever, doesn't matter, but it gives access to every child. Sometimes they write their stories in their first language, so that they can be in flow first, not always in English. And then afterwards they can go home and translate their stories. But the main thing is they have these storytelling objects that are kind of superpowers to them. So I think, the storytelling quilt, you can see it online, you can see it on my website. It's been made into an animation. It has released hundreds and hundreds of stories. It really has. And it works every time. And sometimes when you go into rooms of I write also for, my latest novel, When Shadows Fall, is the story of an 18-year-old boy, and through his journey through school. And so I've worked a lot with kind of, sixth formers over the last few years. And sometimes when I go in with the quilt, you can see they're thinking, oh, does she think we're small children? And then suddenly I'll say, right, you can just go and rummage in the quilt and find something, an object that resonates with you. And my goodness, the storytelling that has come from, 18-year-olds by either, understanding that they have an object, or they have doesn't have to be an object that can fit in the quilt. It could be music, it could be an abstract, it could be, it could be a memory of a beach or a rock in Orkney or whatever. And then once they realize that that's what storytelling is, you've got them. And then you can place the book in their hand that somehow is a little bit like their story, and then you're away.
Thanks, Sita. Um, there's one more question regarding writing, story writing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So my daughter is of 8 years old, love to write stories, and how to guide story writing, I think.
So maybe some of you have done some doodling. I don't know if you've done some doodling. I can see you. You could pick up your doodle pages and we could have a look. Oh, I think there's Indrani.
Yeah, that's from Indrani.
Hello, Indrani. Nice to see you. You can't see me, sorry. I don't know why, but I have written lots of stories, and you can find some of my stories are for your age, but you like to write stories, yeah? You love to write stories. So, and do you like pictures as well? Yeah, do you like drawing pictures? Fantastic. So I say I always start with the picture. I draw the picture first. I doodle my ideas, and you can see those doodles in some of my stories. I always like to draw maps. And then sometimes, not even in straight lines along a page, sometimes in the maps, I start writing words. And like those words are like a treasure hunt. And they help me find my way through the story. Do you sometimes make up characters in your head? Yeah. So I like, sometimes I'll see in a magazine a picture of a character that looks a bit like the character I've imagined, or I'll draw it myself. I haven't found them somewhere else. And then I just keep building and building and building. I'm sorry you can't see my notebook, because my notebook that has a river in it that I've told your people about. It also has stamps that I sent to, because in the old days we used to send letters. I used to send letters to my cousins in India, and it's got stamps from their letters. So do you like collecting things? Do you like collect shells on a beach, or stones, or the holy? Yeah. Okay. So writing is like collecting. You just need to keep collecting. Collect lots and lots of things together, and then sometimes you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so full up with this idea for this story that I have to suddenly write it. And then when you write it, I don't want you to be worried about your grammar or being really clever about clever words that you're using. I want you to let the story flow out of you. and see what happens. It's like a magic thing that comes. You didn't even know in your mind that that story was going to happen, but it comes out of you. And then afterwards, you can look at it and go, I might write that bit a bit more, or I might take that bit out. And that's called editing. And then you're going to show your story to somebody else. And that's the magic bit. When you show your story to somebody else and they laugh, or they cry, or they feel emotional, or they want to go with you on that journey, and then it's incredible. It's like magic. And even if you want to stop telling stories, you can't. Because guess what I do? Every time I finish a book, because I have to spend a long time sitting at my desk to write my books, I say to my editors and publishers, that's it now, I'm done. I've written all the stories. And they just look at me and smile, because they know within about 2 weeks' time, I'm going to come with them with a story, because I can't stop the stories coming into my mind. Once they come, they just won't stop, because it's such an amazing place to be in Storyland. I hope that helped you. And I hope you draw maps and doodle, and keep your doodles. I've kept all my doodles from when I was your age. Yeah. And I'm still writing those stories. Yeah. Good. Big thumbs up. Fantastic. But that,
Thank you.
I was speaking to the child, but that is that everything I've just said
Yeah.
is true for the child in all of us. Yeah. And I really want people to go away from this Zoom and really think about respecting that child that found the books or didn't find the books. I call what I do writing into the heart of childhood. And I think certainly in Western cultures, we do not give enough space to the importance of childhood as a land to live in, as a place of extraordinary imagination, of a place. So that the author Willa Cather, American author Willa Cather, she says that most of the materials a writer uses are gathered before the age of 15. Really think about that, because think about the resonances of things, journeys you took when you were a child that are still resonating through your lives today. And when people read my books, they often say, wow, we didn't, because we have this sort of demarcation between childhood and adulthood, as if it was some kind of checkpoint barrier. Adults are often really surprised and sometimes a little embarrassed about reading stories which center children. And I think that is probably one of the saddest things. It really reflects on what adults think about the state of childhood and the importance of childhood. And I have written a lot into well-being and mental health in my stories. I've written a story for young ones like you, like Worry Angels, which is about children who are worried about going to school and have anxieties. But I have also written stories, intergenerational stories like Kite Spirit, which is set in the Lake District, which is very much about the healing power of nature. But it's also, I wrote it a long time ago, but it centers the absolute need to care for young people's well-being and mental health. And it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. I put on my Instagram account 4 books that really speak into mental health awareness, ranging from, young adults at 18, 19, crossover to for 2-3 children. And I think that for me, stories, to go back to that child that was kind of doodling and daydreaming in the tree by the River Eden and listening to the water music of the river, the space that we can give children to imagine and dream and storytell is also a space that we adults need so much. And we kind of crave it, and we crave that time together. So I read to my children. I mean, my daughter at university now, my youngest daughter, when she's ill, she calls me and asks me to tell her stories, to read her stories. Because, this storytelling, I know you can't see it, but this storytelling that we're doing, when do we give each other this space just to share stories and exchange stories? My favorite thing is when it's a situation where we're in a room and I can tell a story and then somebody else can tell a story and we can really hear each other's voices. I think there's another question in the chat, but I saw it flash up. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another question. What makes from Probish Satyal? What makes some stories so vivid and clearly resonating, and some are very hard to go through? And the second part, there's a second part of the question. I think you've already answered this. Would you share your own personal experience of your best reads?
Oh yeah. Okay, so the first part, what makes stories resonate? I think I'm wearing the artichoke charm that the grandmother gives to her grandchildren in Artichoke Hearts, and she says, you know, sometimes when people get old, they have tough layers around their hearts, but she says to her grandchildren, always try to keep an open and loving heart. Sometimes you just have to get to know people to kind of start to pull away the tough layers and find out, you know, what has led them to become like they are. Like Jide Jackson in Artichoke Hearts, has had a terrible journey as a refugee from Rwanda. So I think that for me, what is at the heart, and you'll see it when you see the storytelling quilt, is the writer has passed something from their heart into the story. And it may not be possible for you to know what it is. You know, not every writer will talk about, you know, standing on a rock in the Lake District or whatever. That's an unusual situation, but there will be something which is charged with a kind of emotional force, whether that be joy or laughter or, you know, abandon or awe or pain. And it will be something that is threaded into the story. And often it's the thing that when you're reading a book on a bus or public transport that will make you laugh out loud or cry uncontrollably. And then you think, and I've said this to teenagers, has this ever happened to you? And some of them like put their hands up and they go, yeah, it's really embarrassing. And I said, how is it that this thing that you're reading on a screen or turning the pages of, this thing which is essentially just, you know, paper, or it's just words on a page, how is it that it's provoked such an extraordinary emotion in you, or a sense that you can write a book yourself, or, you know, giving you a sense of agency, as Sarah was talking about? And it is because it's sort of the supercharge that is in every layer. And for me, that comes from finding metaphors, coherent metaphors, like the rivers of blood to the rivers of love, or the artichoke charm, or the shell that has been come on the ship from India and now is in the hands of the Indian ayah, or the father's shoes, or the painting palette, which contains all the colours that the Nana Josie in Artichoke Hearts painted with from the age of 3 till the last painting she did of her, in her life, of my daughter, who's now at university, was then a baby. So it's kind of like, you won't know necessarily how the writer's done it, but they will have threaded that charge through the story, and that's what we'll convey. I wanted just to share with you a recent novel that I'd read, which I absolutely love. I love this author so much. It's Elif Shafak, and I first read her Island of Missing Trees. And a lot of people always ask me, when are you going to write an adult a novel for adults? And I've said, well, all my novels are for adults, but I think they mean marketed for adults. And Elif Shafak made me think, because of the way that she centers child and teenage characters in that story. She makes me think that actually it's not a big difference. It's just a slightly different approach that she takes. So The Island of Missing Trees is a wonderful story that I've read recently, and also her most recent novel, which is just the title has just escaped me, but it's extraordinary. It's about how we are all connected with water through a raindrop that has traveled throughout history. You probably know that I'm looking for it on my bookshelf. I've suddenly forgotten the title, but it's amazing. It's her latest book, so you can look that up. And I read that, and it was really interesting. So it was a bit like when Secrets Set Sail. What that book does, it takes the story from Victorian times and through sort of colonial history to the present day, and you see the characters from different. You see the characters from different perspectives. Is not one story is not centered, and you see the history unfolding through objects, as I explore in my books. I'm sorry I can't remember the title. I'm having a senior, but you'll be able to look it up. But she is an amazing storyteller that I admire very much today.
Thank you, Sita. We are almost on time. So it's already 5 minutes past than our scheduled time. But whenever you are sending us the pictures, if you can send us the name of the book as well, we
I
can
will
send it
do.
to the participants.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
along
yeah.
with the recording of the session. Thank you everyone for joining the session. And yeah, there are a couple of questions which I shall post to Sita, and Sita can share her response. Thank you everyone for joining, and I will be sharing in chat the details of the British Council Digital Library. Before closing, I'll just request Sarah to just deliver a closing note. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Anisha, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Huge thanks to Sita for taking us on that journey. And I mean, my patchwork set off all sorts of things in my mind, and no doubt for everybody else too. But for me, I was born in London, and later my father got a job in Sydney in Australia. So I had this story of traveling to that part of the world. And even though you might think it was the same language, but there were lots and lots of differences. So anyway, I went back to you evoked some thoughts for me, Sita, and a book that I remembered from my English childhood was Watership Down, as these little rabbits were searching for a safe home. And a story that resonated for me in Australia was a book called Sarah Dane by Catherine Gaskin, and that was about a woman who went to Australia as a convict from England, as a lot of people were, and she was desperately missing her homeland. But of course, when she eventually got to go back there, she realized there was all this classism, if you like, and these divisions. Whereas in Australia, she'd managed to work her way out of her sort of initial convict identity to somebody who was known and respected in society. So anyway, the long and short of that was that I learned to love Australia as I'd loved England. But often it's these stories that help us to get to those spaces. So that was just for me personally, so that's why I'm sharing it. But I'm sure everybody has their own thoughts and story from that lovely sharing session, Sita. And yes, we missed seeing your face. That would have been lovely, but we look forward to you sharing some of your resources with Arnisha, and we can share them around to everybody who joined the session this evening. So thank you to all of you. I'm sitting in Yangon in Myanmar. And so, this is a time where some of your work, Sita, we need a bit of magic. So thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing and the stories that you share. Thank you, everybody, and good night. Bye-bye, and bye-bye to our little storyteller down there in Indrani's screen. Yeah, lovely to see you. Okay,
Bye-bye.
good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Well,
Sarah.
it's
Thanks,
nighttime
Nikki.
here anyway in
Bye.
Yangon. Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Sarah.